Good afternoon. I'm Master Chief Petty Officer Tony McDonald, and I want to welcome you to Class 121 Chief Petty Officer Pinning Ceremony. I ask that you please silence all cell phones during this time-honored tradition. The ceremony you are about to witness is the culmination of a long and arduous journey. It was a journey that did not begin weeks ago when they learned of their selection of Chief Petty Officer, but years ago when they embarked upon their journey as sailors in the United States Navy. Chief Petty Officers, attention! Will the guests please rise for the arrival of the newly selected Chief Petty Officers, the parading of the colors, and the invocation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with tremendous pride that I present to you the Chief Petty Officer class of 121. Class 121, post! Color guard, parade, colors. Chief Thorns will now sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does
Retire colors. Chief Hamrick will now offer the invocation.
Let us pray. God, thank you for this glorious day. We thank you for our leaders, the U.S. Navy, and new Chief Petty Officers here today. We ask you to give them wisdom and guidance as they continue on in their careers. We ask you for your protection as we all drive home safely today. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Chief Petty Officers and guests, please be seated. Chief Selects, parade, rest. Ladies and gentlemen, I take great pleasure in introducing our honored guest speaker, Captain Beal, Commanding Officer, Navy Reserve, U.S. Fleet Forces Maritime and Air Operation Headquarters. Captain Beal.
How's everybody doing?
Good, sir.
Are we hot? Yes, we are. You can't stack this many people in a room without air conditioning without getting a little warm. So, I can't tell you how honored I am to be here today. In fact, when I told my 17-year-old daughter, and she's been around for, again, the last 17 years of my Navy career, that I was coming out to speak at the Chief's pinning ceremony, she kind of looked at me and did what a 17-year-old normally does. Cool. Like only a 17-year-old can. And then she stopped for a second because she has been around for the last 17 years and she's been around chiefs. She stopped and she said, "You know, Dad, you better make it a good speech because unlike the officers you normally hang out with, the chiefs will actually tell you if you suck." So I hope I don't suck. Admiral Busby, I know you must be here somewhere. I haven't had a chance to meet you yet. Welcome. Captain Frederick, good to see you, sir. Skippers, captains, master chiefs, senior chiefs, and chiefs. And yes, family and friends and selectees standing in the corners. It's good to see you all here today. I'm absolutely, again, honored to be your guest speaker. I have three responsibilities today as guest speaker, three things that I have to do. The first one is to remember to thank the families, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. The second one is to talk about chiefs in general. And the third thing is to talk about the selectees you can see at the side of the room here. So let me get started. It was a change of command ceremony a few years back for a one-star admiral. He was in charge of the entire Navy Reserve Air Force. That's about 6,000 sailors, 250 aircraft at the time, and about $1 billion in hangars and plant property and airplanes and stuff. And it was a pretty good ceremony. He, at the appointed time, the one-star stands up. He gets an award from the three-star. He gives a rousing speech because he's a pretty smart guy and he's pretty eloquent. And then he sits down afterwards, pretty pleased with himself. He's got a big smile on his face. And the whole ceremony comes to a complete stop. And there's some whispering back and forth on the platform. And this is a true story. This is not a joke. Whispering back and forth on the platform, and then one of the admirals on the platform reaches over and whispers in the guy's ear. And that admiral sprints back up to the microphone and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's just been brought to my attention that I'm going to be going to the jewelry store this afternoon because in my speech I forgot to thank my wife." Nice work, right? So we learned from that admirals are fallible, but we also learned that we got to take time to thank our families. So with that, I want to do something a little unusual here. Can I get the spouses of the selectees? Where are you at? Can you stand up for me, please? Spouses of the selectees. How about kids? Can I get the kids to stand up as well? Wow, you guys are way ahead of me. I was going to ask you to do that. Thank you. Remain. Oh, no, don't sit down. No, not yet. Not yet. While you're standing, I just want to make eye contact with some of you, and all of you if I can. And I just want to say that excellence and superior performance is not an individual thing. It's a team sport. The folks standing on the sides of these walls can't do this without your support. You've been there for deployments. You've been there for drill weekends. I'm assuming, I should know this, but are all of you on the side walls, are they all cell res? No. We have some cell res? Okay, so we got a mixture of cell res and FTS on the side walls. Here's the thing, I mean, we're trying to balance either career and family or 2 careers and family, and that's hard. And without you, they don't succeed, okay? It's a team sport. I appreciate you guys, and I know they do as well. So once again, a round of applause for our families. Good to see you. Now here's the bad news. You don't get to go to the jewelry store this afternoon. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the chief. And these are chiefs as a whole. Now I'm not going to be telling any stories to the folks in the audience because you already know this, but this is for the general crowd. The chief is unique to Navy service. Yeah, we have chiefs in the Coast Guard too, but it's really unique to the maritime services. Other services have NCOs and they have sergeants, but the Navy has chiefs, and the chief is a special thing. I see the chief as a shadow of American exceptionalism. That if you perform well enough and you work hard enough, you're going to get promoted. You're going to be put in charge. You're going to be put in a position of responsibility. And oh, by the way, the higher up you go, the more you become a chief, the more people issues you're going to have to deal with. And people issues are always complex. So be careful what you wish for. You all wanted to be chiefs. Now you're going to be chiefs. You're going to get what you asked for, okay? We're going to put you in charge. Chiefs contribute to the organization like nobody else. And that contribution to the organization is what we expect from a chief. In fact, other countries that have navies and armed services, they understand the value of our chiefs. They've figured it out. And now and then you'll see one of them, like Hungary or Poland, send an NCO to the chief, to the CMC Cobb School or to the Senior Enlisted Academy to try to figure out what we've got over here that they can make over there. You see that now and then. Again, that contribution is what we expect out of a Chief Petty Officer. I'm going to tell you a couple of sea stories about my personal experience with chiefs. My first one is young Lieutenant Junior Grade Beale showing up to his first squadron. That was Attack Squadron 52, flying A-6s off the USS Carl Vinson in the Indian Ocean. I joined them mid-deployment. I was a brand new guy to the squadron. And, you know, they teach you how to land an airplane on a carrier and they teach you how to take it off the front end. What they don't teach you how to do very well when you're a young aviator is how to get from point A to point B on the flight deck. So I emerged right where my ready room was, which was on the aft end of the ship, and I started to walk towards the bow of the flight deck. I almost called it the fright deck. That would have been more appropriate. As I was walking up the flight deck, I'm just kind of lollygagging around, doing my thing, not really paying it the proper respect. And for those of you that haven't been on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier during a launch or during flight ops, it's a pretty weird place. Lots of airplanes turning. Take Chicago O'Hare Airport, mix it with a little ballet from Baryshnikov, and put that on top of a greasy skillet, and that's the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. I'm walking from the aft end to the front end where my airplane is, and I stepped right in front of an A-7 Corsair. How many people know what an A-7 is? Okay, man right here knows. He put his hand up first. Yeah, the A7 had a gigantic intake and a huge turbofan engine, and it sat underneath, and that intake was not protected from human bodies. And as I stepped in front of that thing, I felt a pull on the back of my neck, and I almost got knocked down by the tug that followed. And the guy that pulled me back was one of the flight deck chiefs from one of the other squadrons. I never found out what his name was. Quite honestly, had he not tugged me backward, I might have been hamburger meat today. I was happy for that. And that kind of decisive leadership, that willingness to act under pressure, is what we expect from a chief. He didn't care that I was an officer. All he wanted to do was keep me from getting going down that intake. He probably didn't want to change that engine, is probably what he was really. But decisiveness, that's what we expect from a chief. My second chief experience that I want to share with you was when I was about mid-grade in that first tour, that is. I was the phase and corrosion branch head in an A6 squadron. And for those of you that know the A6 intruder, it was prone to rust a little bit. And we didn't get the best sailors in our phase and corrosion work center there. My chief was a young chief by the name of Chief Mendoza, a great American and my first mentor. If I could list my first mentor, yeah, you bet, as a lieutenant, it was a chief. And he was a great mentor. He taught me a lot. Chief Mendoza cared about his sailors. He also cared about discipline, and the most common words out of his mouth to me, because of all the problems that we had in the work center, were, "Sir, have you heard?" or "Sir, are you aware of?" And he didn't say it fast, because he had made chief. It had taken him 12 years to get to chief, but he had a severe stutter. So whenever he spoke, I mean, the simple phrase, "Good morning, LT," which is the way he always greeted me, could take about 30 seconds coming out of his mouth. And if I tried to speed him up, or if I tried to finish his sentence for him, guess what? It didn't go any faster. It only frustrated him more. But I'll tell you what, that chief taught me more, and I learned best to sit down and just listen to him. Best to sit down and listen to the chief, especially as a JO. Because I learned more about deck plate leadership from that guy than I think I've learned ever since. He was an incredible leader. And interestingly enough, when he had to give counseling, and we're talking about the old-fashioned days counseling, Master Chief, you know what that is. Whenever he gave counseling to a young sailor, that stutter went away completely. I don't know how that worked, but it did. Great mentor. I still remember him to this day. He's one of my favorites. Some of you may know the individual I'm going to talk about next. He retired a few years ago, but when I was a squadron commander at VFA 201, flying F-18s, my command master chief was Donnie Shaft. We got a couple of snickers in the crowd. Okay, so we got some folks that know him. Some of you might have a different opinion of him than I do, but I got to tell you, he was one of the best master chiefs, best command master chiefs I've ever known. He made chief in 8 years. He was a master chief by about year 13, and he had about 10 years of master chief experience before he retired at 24 years. He was a command master chief with, I think, 4 or 5 CMC tours under his belt. The thing I remember about him most was that he was hot on making sure, speaking of hot, sorry I said that word, he wanted to make sure that the squadron spaces were immaculate. He took over for the first lieutenant. And what was funny about that was the cleanliness that he inspired sort of bred upon itself. The cleaner the squadron spaces got, the cleaner my sailors wanted to keep them. And the better the airplanes started to look. And the better, I mean, it all just sort of permeated from there. And it dawned on me, he was an expert. He was an expert in human behavior. He was an expert in just about everything. Navy programs, discipline, you name it. He was an expert. And once again, that expertise is what we expect from a chief. I'll tell you one more sea story. This has nothing to do with me. This happened before my time and before your time. Anybody here know who, I've gone off my notes. Anybody here know who, where is he? There he is. Master Chief, Aviation Ordnance Chief Petty Officer John William Finn. Anybody ever heard that? Oh, we have heard that name. Has this been part of our training? So you know his story. Good. What did he do, folks? I'll skip the story if you want me to. You want me to skip the story or just tell the story? Tell it. Okay, we'll tell it. Anybody know what happened on December 7th of 1941? Pearl Harbor, right. And he was at Kaneohe as an ordnance chief, and during the attack on Pearl Harbor, he got behind a 50 caliber machine gun and started laying waste to Japanese aircraft that were attacking Kaneohe. And he got wounded several times, but he was still firing that machine gun until somebody ordered him to get out from behind the machine gun and go get treated for his injuries, which were fairly substantial. He went back and got first aid treatment, and then when U.S. airplanes returned to the air station, he went back out and helped assist in the rearming of those aircraft despite being in extreme pain. He was promoted to lieutenant later on, but he earned his Congressional Medal of Honor as a chief, and that's courage. Now, courage comes in many forms. These days, there's a lot of cause for courage. We have courage in social situations that might result in trouble later on. We have courage in the workplace. There, we have courage that occurs when you've got to do the right thing, even though your boss might tell you, I want to do something else. Courage comes in many forms, not just under fire. But courage is what we expect from a chief. And I think Chief Finn did that. Okay. So let me talk about the chiefs that are standing, the chief selects, pardon me, that are standing up on the sidewalls here. We have 21 selectees from 10 different commands. 5 are from Surge, Maine, down at the Newport News Navy Shipyard. I'm sorry, the Norfolk Navy Shipyard. I got that one. Sorry about that, folks. 5 are from VFC 12 at NAS Oceana. 3 are from VR 56 at NAS Oceana. The remaining 8 are from 7 commands, including Navy Operational Support Centers, which we call NOSCs, Norfolk, Richmond, and Indian Head, Maryland. The selectees represent 10 different Navy ratings, from Airedales to Snipes to Yeoman to Weather Guessers. We have one EOD guy out there, which is Explosive Ordnance Disposal. We got all kinds of folks. These 21 selectees have a combined total of 291 years of service, for an average of 14 years apiece. I think we have a couple that are early promoters. 2 have less than 10 years, 1 has more than 20. They represent over 20 deployments abroad. I just met Chief Selective Dean. I think she probably has the passport stamps more than anybody. She's been to Diego Garcia, Bahrain, Iraq, Afghanistan, Qatar, and the Horn of Africa. And I met Chief Select Miller, who has, and I had to ask him because I wasn't sure if this was right, but he's got about 5 combat pumps. Now, they're not 6-month pumps, but they're combat pumps nonetheless, to Iraq and Afghanistan. And since he's EOD, they're probably pretty sporty. I'm sure he's not just going over there and playing Call of Duty or Halo or whatever you guys are playing these days. I'm still stuck on the Wii. Folks teamed up with our local Hampton Road selectees from as far away as Harrisonburg, Virginia, like Chief Select Scoops and Hadley. And I think we can all agree that this is an impressive group. And for those of you that don't know it, you have to exert some sustained superior performance to get where these folks are standing. And they've been training, by the way, since, where is it? Well, let's just say for the last 86 days, raising $10,000 to defer the selecting mess cost and to give to charity. So now I'm going to tie it all back together. We've talked about sustained superior performance. We've talked about to those who can handle much, much will be given, and you be careful what you wish for. We've talked about responsibility, contribution to the organization, decisiveness, deck plate leadership, expertise, and courage. All part of this group of selectees standing here on the sidewalls this afternoon. You guys have completed your training. And I don't know if you've realized this yet, but now it's your legacy. Now it's time for you to give back. That's what this represents. So now it's time for me to close. How many people in the audience know who Danny White is? Anybody? Oh, we got one. Senior Chief, do you know who Danny White is? Wow. Okay. See, I'm not a Dallas fan, but yeah. Okay, Danny White is exactly right. He got it. So I owe you lunch or something. But no, you'll take it. I know. Danny White was the Dallas Cowboys quarterback that followed Roger Staubach. So if you haven't heard of Danny White, I'm sure that even the non-Cowboy fans know who Roger Staubach is. For this ceremony today, the folks on the sidewall here, the selectees, that's Roger Staubach. I'm Danny White. Okay? I'm the guy you're going to forget. These are the folks you're going to remember, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So, one more time, I want to remind everybody that, especially those of you on the sidewalls, that the legacy that precedes you is impressive, and it's a legacy that you will all contribute to in the future. I want you to continue to conduct yourselves with honor, courage, commitment. I'm going to add humility to that, because that's important when you get on chief. Okay? And with that, I've just got 3 more things to say. God bless the Navy. God bless the United States of America, and God bless the Chiefs.
Thank you, Captain Bill. Master Chief Luce will now read the presentation of the anchors.
The fouled anchor is the emblem of the rank of the Chief Petty Officer of the United States Navy. Attached to the anchor is a length of chain and the letters USN. To the novice, the anchor, chain, and letters only identify a Chief Petty Officer of the United States Navy. But to a chief, they have a more noble and glorious meaning. The U stands for unity, which reminds us of cooperation, maintaining harmony, and continuity of purpose and action. The S stands for service, which reminds us of service to our God, our fellow man, and our Navy. The N stands for navigation, which reminds us to keep ourselves on a true course so that we may walk upright before God and man in our transactions with all mankind, but especially with our fellow chiefs. The chain is symbolic of flexibility. It reminds us of the chain of life that we forge day by day, link by link. And may it be forged with honor, morality, and virtue. The anchor is emblematic of the hope and glory of the fulfillment of all of God's promises to our souls. The golden or precious anchor, by which we must be kept steadfast in faith and encouraged to abide in our proper station amidst the storm of temptation, affliction, and persecution. Thank you.
Thank you, Master Chief. The time has come to place the prized and well-deserved anchors on the collars of our accepted Chief Petty Officers. Chief Select, attention! Sponsors, prepare for the pinning of our new chiefs. Side boys! Post! Chief Select Hoops, front and center. Chief Select Hoops is being pinned by her mother, Elizabeth and John Hoops, United States Navy, Commander, retired. Chief Select Ochoa, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Hoops, arriving. Chief Select Ochoa is being pinned by his aunt and uncle, James and Linda Chavez, and son and daughter, Miguel and Brianna Ochoa. Chief Select Hennessy, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Ochoa, arriving. Chief Select Hennessy is being pinned by Chief Stovall. Chief Select Perkins, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Hennessy, arriving. Chief Select Perkins is being pinned by her children, LaPortia and Cherry, and her mother, Loretta Perkins. Chief Select Zitrine, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Perkins, arriving. Chief Select Citrine is being pinned by her father, Ivy Lagardier, and mother, Violet Lagardier. Chief Select Udine, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Citrine, arriving. Chief Select Udine is being pinned by her husband, Imran Udine, and Chief Johnson. Chief Select Crutchley, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Udine, arriving. Chief Select Crutchley is being pinned by his wife Kelly Crutchley and daughter Maddie. Chief Select Matar, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Crutchley, arriving. Chief Select Matar is being pinned by his wife, Raja Matar. Chief Select Moore, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Matar, arriving. Chief Select Moore is being pinned by his cousin, Tony Moore, Command Sergeant Major, United States Army retired, and girlfriend, Tasha Brick. Chief Select Fight, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Moore, arriving. Chief Select Fike is being pinned by his wife, Emily Fike, and mother, Bridget Fike. Chief Select Hadley, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Fike, arriving. Chief Select Hadley is being pinned by his wife, Donica Hadley, and his mother and father, Janet and George Hadley. Chief Select Walburn, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Hadley, arriving. Chief Select Walburn is being pinned by his wife, Jennifer Walburn, and Master Chief Whitcomb. Chief Select Larch, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Walburn, arriving. Chief Select Larch is being pinned by his wife Tammy Larch and father Edward Larch. Chief Select Polance, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Lawrence, arriving. Chief Select Paul Lance is being pinned by his fiancee, Chief Naomi Leslie, and mother and father, Judy and John D'Amico. Chief Select Dukes, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Paul Lance, arriving. Chief Select Dukes is being pinned by his wife Amy Lynn Dukes and mother Sheila Carter.
And his sister Y1 Dukes Warren.
Noted. Chief Select Swedinsky, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Dukes, arriving. Chief Select Swedinsky is being pinned by his wife Sarah Swedinsky and father Marvin Swedinsky. Chief Select Carson, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Swedinsky arriving. Chief Select Carson is being pinned by his father Fernando Carson and his fiancee Jennifer Holman. Chief-Select Miller, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Carson, arriving. Chief-Select Miller is being pinned by his father, Commander Shilahita, United States Navy retired, and son, Kai Miller. Chief-Select McCune, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Miller, arriving.
That's my Ohana.
Chief-Select McCune is being pinned by his mother, Rosemary, and father, Brian McCune. Chief-Select Lyle, front and center. Chief Petty Officer McCune, arriving. Chief-Select Blyles being pinned by Chief Siniger. Chief-Select French, front and center. Chief Petty Officer Blau, arriving. Chief-Select French is being pinned by his wife, Cherise French, and Senior Chief McKinney. Chief Petty Officer French, arriving. Side boys, post. Class 121, front and center.
Class, 121, forward, march.
Class 121, left, face. Chief Braga will now read the Chief Petty Officer's Creed.
All Chief Petty Officers, attend to the creed. During this day, you have been caused to humbly accept challenge and face adversity. This you have accomplished with rare good grace. Point is that, as some of these challenges may have seemed, they were valid, time-honored reasons behind each pointed barb. It was necessary to meet these hurdles with blind faith in the fellowship of the Chief Petty Officers. The goal was to instill in you that trust is inherent with the donning of the uniform of the Chief Petty Officer. It was our intent to impress upon you that challenge is good, a great and necessary reality which cannot mar you, which in fact strengthens you. In your future as a Chief Petty Officer, you will be forced to endure adversity far beyond that imposed upon you today. You must face each challenge and adversity with the same dignity and good grace you demonstrated today. By experience, by performance, and by testing, you have been this day advanced to Chief Petty Officer. In the United States Navy, and only in the United States Navy, the rank of E7 carries with it unique responsibilities and privileges you are now bound to observe and expect to fulfill. Your entire way of life is now changed. More will be expected of you. More will be demanded of you. Not because you're an E7, because you are now the Chief Petty Officer. You have not been merely promoted one pay grade, you have joined an exclusive fellowship. As in all fellowships, you have a special responsibility to your comrades, even as they have a special responsibility to you. This is why we, in the United States Navy, we maintain with pride and feelings of our accomplishments once we have attained the position of Chief Petty Officer. Your new responsibilities and privileges do not appear in print. They have no official standing. They cannot be referred to by name, number, or file. They have existed for over 100 years. Chiefs before you have freely accepted responsibility beyond the call of printed assignment. Their actions and their performance demand the respect of their seniors as well as their juniors. It is now required that you be the fountain of wisdom, the ambassador of goodwill, the authority in personal relations, and as well as in technical applications. As the chief is a household phrase in and out of the Navy. You are now the chief. The exalted position you have achieved, and the word exalted is used advisedly, exists only because of the attitude and performance of the chiefs before you. It shall exist only as long as you and your fellow chiefs maintain these standards. It was our intention that you never forget this day. It was our intention to test you, to try you, and to accept you. Your performance has assured us that you will wear the hat, the same pride as the comrades in arms before you. We take a deep and sincere pleasure in clasping your hand and accepting you as the Chief Petty Officer in the United States Navy.
Thank you, Chief Frogger. Ladies and gentlemen, family, friends, and distinguished guests, may I introduce to you your new Chief Petty Officers. Navy Pride! This concludes our ceremony. Please join all of us for our reception at the theater entrance. Thank you all for attending. God bless America. God bless the United States Navy.